Hello everyone, and welcome to my complete strategy guide for fighting the Ancient Leshen. If you're having trouble with this fight, you've come to the right place. I'm going to be breaking down the top 14 tips for fighting the Ancient Leshen, then we'll do an analysis of his moveset, followed by 4 recommended builds to help you understand kind of like my thought process. If you learned something new here, don't forget to leave a like on the video before you leave. Let's get started. Tip number 1. The Ancient Leshen's head takes the most damage. The body and limbs take considerably less damage. I'm sure we'll have more data on the actual hit zone values when he comes out on the PC. However, in the meantime, one thing I did notice is that Weakness Exploit only works on his head for shot type damage. So if you're using a bow or a bow gun, you need to be shooting him in the head. Don't bother with that poison damage, by the way. It's not worth your time. Poison really only does about 144 damage to the Ancient Leshen. Yes, I tested this, and that's really not that much damage considering how long it takes to build up that poison damage. In fact, probably the only decent method of poisoning him is with poison ammo level 2. It takes 3 shots and then it only does about 144 damage total. So if you'd used pretty much any other type of ammo, you would have just done more damage to him. So even in the best scenario, it's not that good. Paralysis, on the other hand, is extremely useful, but you should try to only be paralyzing Ancient Leshen in stage 4, when he is teleporting around like crazy. That's right, even in stage 3, if you can avoid paralyzing him in stage 3, I would save it all for stage 4. Tip number 2. The Ancient Leshen has about 65,000 health. That is a lot, and it does not scale down for single player, so if you want to defeat the Ancient Leshen quickly in a reasonable amount of time, you're going to have to put a team together. If you're looking for a really great place to find active players, my Discord server now has over 6,000 members in it, and we have LFG channels for you to ask others to join your match. If this sounds like something you would be interested in joining, there's a link in the video description. You could just run the event with randoms, but the nice thing about the people in my server is that they've probably watched this video and they're going to be more informed than the average player. So tip number 2 is about putting a decent team of players together. Really saves you a lot of time. Tip number 3. The Ancient Leshen fight is broken into 4 stages, with stage 4 being the most difficult part of the fight by far, so it can seem like you guys are doing well, but then you reach stage 4 and he wrecks you. The main problem is that he's going to be teleporting very often in stage 4, and he's going to call in roughly 3 to 4 waves of Jagras. So use all of your crowd control options in stage 4. That means you're going to be saving paralysis, part breaks, stun, and mounting for stage 4 as much as possible. You'll also know you're close to the end of stage 4 after you've cleared roughly 4 waves of Jagras. So I noticed the Jagras is not just a random move he uses. I suspect he's calling in the Jagras based on health gauge, right? He reaches a threshold of remaining health and then he says, okay, it's time to call in the Jagras. Tip number 4. Mounting the Leshen is easily your best crowd control method for this fight. First, I'm going to show you why. On screen, you can see me maxing out my time on the Ancient Leshen's head. There's a time limit of about 30 seconds before he shakes you off, no matter how much stamina you had left. So I try to queue up the finishing attack at just under 30 seconds, and then I delay the actual finishing blow as well. This gives my whole team a lot of time to deal crazy amounts of damage while I'm mounted. Tip Tip number 5. You can mount the Leshen more times in the fight if you bring the Rider charm. I probably only recommend it for the hammer, maybe the greatsword, and maybe even the sword and shield. The goal is to mount the Leshen a lot in stages 3 and 4 of the fight. If you were playing solo, you would not use the Rider Charm because there would be no one to take advantage of the prolonged mount, and you would be losing out on damage by not building more offense or more defense even. If you're going to do a Rider Charm build, you will want to bring the Draken Helmet, the Rider Charm, and probably try eating Feline Rider at the canteen as well. You can even consider using the Glider Mantle with the hammer and the greatsword. You have to be really careful with this issue because the temptation is, I'm just going to spam mounts on him. The truth is, you want to hold off on this build until stages 3 and 4, if possible. In the meantime, you should be bringing skills like health boost, protection, maintenance, and probably others. Tip number 6. Although the Leshen teleports around, if your team stands together, you can actually lure him to a ledge where you can perform an attack called a ledge hop. Ledge hops aren't that complicated. Hammers, greatswords, and gunlances all have an aerial attack with forward momentum that pulls you back onto the ledge that you've just rolled off of. In fact, I recently learned that with the hammer, as you use your attack to return to the ledge, once the forward momentum begins, you can actually then change the direction of your hammer attack so that you're moving forward but attacking behind you. It's really important to take a few minutes in the training room and actually test these moves out so that, if you prefer to use the hammer or the greatsword or the gunlance, these are moves you really need to learn. Tip number 7, the Ancient Leshen never gains immunity to flash pods, and they'll always interrupt his attacks, even his one-hit KO move, the Bird Bomb. This means you should be bringing 3 flash pods and 10 flash bugs, and then set up your radial menu to be able to quickly craft more flash pods. Use these to break the root pin, interrupt his Bird Bomb, and even to immobilize the waves of Jagras. Tip number 8 is about Part Breaker. My team and I all built Part Breaker level 3, and we tested out various builds to see how it affected the fight. Part breaks are a guaranteed knockdown on the Ancient Leshen, so obviously they seem valuable. He also enters a weakened state for a while, where he won't summon birds or Jagras, and sometimes he just wanders around after the part break. But this is not permanent, he eventually goes right back to his powerful attacks. By the end of the test, we preferred to bring better defensive options like Health Boost and Tool Specialist rather than building Part Breaker, and this is because we realized with our Part Breaker builds that his parts were just breaking earlier. However, the best time to break his parts is actually in stages 3 and 4 when you really want to try and crowd control him, so don't bother with the Part Breaker skill. Tip number 9 is going to be about building wide range. That's because the wide range skill is really important for this fight, and you can even have 2 players running it in order to keep the team healed. You'll want the Lunastra Alpha Legs and the Lunastra Beta Vambraces. Alternatively, you can try bringing the Friendship Charm, which is going to give you 3 levels, and you can pair this with, the Dragon set or the Teostra Gamma set. For your item loadout, don't forget to bring a Stera Jerky in order to quickly heal the bleed status on your teammates. You can also bring 10 honey and craft the first aids from the community chest into first aid meds. You should also be eating Might Seeds throughout the fight in order to give the team an extra boost of damage. Keep in mind, even when you have a healer on your team, that you're still responsible for keeping yourself over half health, and that in my solo runs, being lazy or risky about my health was always inevitably how I got killed. Tip number 10 is about the Ignisign and Hunter Runestone. Similar to the Final Fantasy emote used in fighting the Behemoth, Capcom wants you to be equipping and using this item in the Ancient Leshen fight. It does all of the things it did in the regular Leshen fight, but this time it also frees players trapped by the deadly root pin. When Ancient Leshen came out, I was disappointed to learn that the rune did not stagger him immediately when I used it. However, it's not because now the rune sucks, it's because Capcom rebalanced it for multiplayer. With some testing, we discovered roughly 6 shots with the rune caused the Ancient Leshen to go through the on fire flinching animation, and I imagine it also reduces his revoltures. Whether you decide to use it on him or not, you will want to bring it to free your teammates from the pin as well as to burn his root wall. Tip number 11, this is an important one. There's a few tricks you can use to help deal with the Ancient Leshen's constant teleportation. This first trick is for anyone not playing with volume. Simply use the target lock-on mechanism that's already in the game, and your screen will be jerked around to look at the Leshen's location. However, if you want to get really good at fighting the Ancient Leshen, you need to be playing with surround sound, probably on a quality set of headphones, and then turn off the background music. If you do this, you're going to know where he teleported to by listening to the ambient sounds. You can see me accurately predicting his location in the gameplay footage. This is one of the best tips I can give you because predicting his teleports is extremely useful for Stage 4. Tip number 12 is about the slinger pods that you should be using against the Ancient Leshen. We already talked about flash pods, which are a must-have, but you should also be thinking about the dragon pods and especially the bomb pods that he drops. I noticed about 2 shots of the dragon pods are going to cause a flinch, and of course, bomb pods give a flinch for each shot, which is really nice. I also want to point out that when the Ancient Leshen flinches from a bomb pod, we learned that his root pin breaks, freeing your teammate. So I'm assuming this is true with dragon pods as well, and with interrupting his bird bomb attack. What I like to do is stand over the bomb pod and use the in-game signal to let my teammates know I'm standing on something nice. Alternatively, you could even make a shout out that says bomb pods here. Then once everyone has picked them up, you can just take turns shooting them and he stays flinched for like 12 shots and 500 damage. So don't sleep on those bomb pods, go pick them up. Tip number 13 is about eating at the canteen. The very first thing you want to do is check for feline insurance in all of the pre-made meals. If one of them has it, consider using a meal voucher to guarantee you unlock feline insurance. This skill is basically giving your team an extra life. The next tip is that after about 10 minutes passing the hunt, you're given the chance to eat another meal, so you can actually go check again for feline insurance. I've been learning more and more about optimizing defense in this game, and really eating feline insurance at the canteen is right at the top of the list of useful things you can do to stay alive. After feline insurance, the other 2 feline food skills I would recommend for this fight is probably feline rider for weapons with good mount attacks, or feline moxie, which acts just like the gut skill. Tip number 14 is just going to be a group of smaller tips that don't warrant their own section. Other than Rocksteady Mantle and Temporal Mantle, Health Booster is great for healing the team, and Glider Mantle can be useful for some weapons trying to deal mount damage. B, most weapons should have 1 or even 2 health regen augmentations on them. Bows and bowguns are probably the only exception. If you can't afford a health regen augmentation, then it is probably the case that you aren't properly geared to take on an Ancient Leshen, and you should consider waiting. C, the majority of your fights are going to end with your team wiping rather than with you running out of time. So sometimes you just need to relax and spend more time reacting to the Ancient Leshen rather than just pushing him as hard as you can. And D, for bowgun users, this is one of those extra difficult fights where you really should consider using your expensive demon and armor ammo. Alright, that's all 14 tips that I had for you, but keep in mind those are general tips for fighting the Ancient Leshen. The really important information is going to be in understanding his moveset. The Ancient Leshen's attacks are especially confusing, so this part of the guide is going to really help you do a much better job in the fight. What's interesting about the Ancient Leshen is that he doesn't have more attacks than the average monster in the game, they just change, and they all look kind of the same, so it gets very confusing. He's kind of like a magician, and you need to see what he does with his body and his hands in order to know what his next attack is going to be. It's also worth pointing out that his blind spot is right behind him, since a majority of his attacks actually come out in the front. Alright, let's get started. Number 1 is going to be teleport. The Leshen folds up his arms and teleports away from you, or into you, and occasionally directly into the same spot. Be sure that you're luring him over to ledges for teammates who want to ledge hop. If you chase him, you will move him all over the map, so occasionally you need to stop chasing him and let him come to you. Try shooting him with the bomb pod just as he comes out of a teleport to flinch him as you approach. The other thing you can do, of course, is to just flash him with a flash pod, but those, you kind of have a limited number of those in the middle of the fight, so you can't just literally spam them. Move number 2, summon Revoltures. The Leshen swings one arm forward the same way he would to send out Revoltures, but instead he is simply summoning a Revolture aura that will deal chip damage to you if you're standing near him. Typically, he will have to do this after you part break him because his Revoltures will fly away after the part break. It's a very punishable move. Also, the stronger his Revolture aura is, the more chip damage you take. Move number 3, summon Jagras. The Leshen does a kind of howl that will bring in Jagras, then he points to the player that he wants them to chase. The entire move is extremely punishable, so get your strongest combos in while he's using this. The incoming Jagras have 480 health, and they can deal chip damage through the Temporal Mantle without causing the auto dodge to activate. The Jagras do a surprising amount of damage too, and they have a jump attack that will cause you to trip. Most of my solo runs were lost during the Jagras wave. He summons them probably 4 times in stage 4 of the Ancient Leshen fight, so it's really important for you to work out a way to clear them. If your weapon does not have any strong wave clearing attacks, try setting down barrel bombs instead, and don't forget you can actually keep the Jagras flashed with flash pods. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to break his moves down into 3 categories: physical, Revoltures, and root attacks. Let's get started with the physical moveset. Move number 4, Claw Slash. The Leshen will lock onto a player and swing his arm out. This move also deals bleed, which will eventually lead to the bleed ailment. A lot of the Leshen's moves have a powered up version of the attack. With Slash, the Leshen will attack with a second swing. Keep track of who he targeted because he will turn all the way around in an attempt to hit them, and he might accidentally hit you too in that case. What's nice about this move though is that you can bait him into using it, and then you can easily outspace it as well. Move number 5, Claw Grapple. I almost called this the Claw Hug. The Leshen will teleport into you and attempt to hug you with both claws. This move does a much higher amount of damage than you probably realize, roughly half of your health bar. So don't try to just tank it with the Rocksteady Mantle, and be careful about when you're eating because sometimes he'll choose that moment to finish you off with a Claw Grapple. Simply detect that he's going to use the move because he teleported directly into you, and then outspace it, and finally come in with a punish because he spends a lot of time recovering from this move after he misses. Move number 6, Claw Slam. This is a melee attack with a very small range and plenty of time to dodge it. However, if it lands, it's going to knock you on your back, even if you're wearing the Rocksteady Mantle. The Ancient Leshen lifts his right arm and then slams it down in front of him very quickly, as if he was trying to squash a bug. Try rolling behind him at the start of the move, but if it does land, if you have flash pods equipped, you can fire them to protect yourself from any further attacks, which is what I recommend. That also means you need to have the flash pods equipped. Alright, and now we'll move on to his bird attacks. Number 7, Revolture Stream. This is a lighter Revolture attack that can be confusing to dodge because it will sometimes have multiple groups of Revoltures coming at you in several beams. It mostly disrupts the player and causes chip damage. The trick is not to strafe too heavily when dodging this attack because you will typically find yourself between 2 streams of birds. Notice he pulls his arm up as if he is brushing you away when he's using this attack. Move number 8, Revolture Wave. This is a heavy Revolture attack that starts with a longer windup. The Leshen will have his arm pulled across his chest, and then he swings that arm forward as if he's Dracula, releasing a bunch of bats from his cape. No matter how big his Revolture aura is, this move is always the same large flock of Revoltures. It's not easy to outspace, but you can actually dodge through it. Also, if you're underneath him on an incline, the hitbox tends to be too high up and it misses you completely. Be sure to punish this move before he teleports away because this move hits harder, but he also needs more time to recover before he can teleport. Move number 9, Bird Bomb. In stages 3 and 4, the Ancient Leshen gains a new attack that is basically just a copy of Teostra's Supernova. You can easily dive evade it, or you can flash it. However, it's important to note that you cannot guard this move at all, so don't even try, and it deals so much damage that there's almost no chance for you to live through it. At first I thought this move would be a really big deal, but considering a single flash pod will stop it each time, and it has a big windup where the camera zooms out, you almost always have a chance to interrupt it, which is what I recommend doing. And now we move on to the root attacks. These all look really similar to each other and they have different power levels, so it can be confusing to try and determine what the roots are going to do. Again, you have to look at him as if he's a magician and think about what spell he's casting. Move number 10, Root Shield. The Leshen quickly reaches into the ground with his left arm, and a shield of roots will pop up that you can burn down with the Hunter Rune or the Igni sign. He will stay behind the shield for 2 or 3 moves, so it's worth your time to get behind these roots or burn them. I also want to point out that you can easily jump over these roots as well. The root shield will actually damage you and knock you away if you didn't roll behind him while he was setting it up. Move number 11, the Root Cone. This is one of his most common root attacks, and it doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it's very disruptive. The Ancient Leshen quickly kneels down and puts his right arm into the ground. After he's done this, you typically see 3 lines of roots come out in kind of a cone. You've got a middle line, a left line, and a right line. And if he was facing you, he's going to aim the middle line at you. So what you need to do is walk to your left or walk to your right, but not too far, or else you're going to hit the outer lines of roots. Does that make sense? And these root lines have a lot of active frames, so Capcom is expecting you to just keep strafing and then accidentally touch one of these lines, and it's going to damage you and send you flying. The trick is, if you've managed to avoid the center line, to then stand still so that none of the other lines hit you. Also, if you're trying to punish this move, your best bet is to already be pretty close to the Leshen and then try to roll behind him, because it doesn't have any hitboxes behind him. Move number 12 is Root Snake. This move is very similar to Root Cone, except 2 lines of roots come out of the sides of the Ancient Leshen, and these lines will actually zigzag around and try to follow the player. He also almost makes the same body movements to cast this, except he's going to move slower. So you're going to see him kneel down, but he's going to be putting his arm on the ground, but it's just all going to be a bit slower. Move number 13 is a big deal because he uses this move when he's mounted. It's the concentric root rings. This is the same move that Archtemplar Zenijiva has. The Ancient Leshen starts this move by kneeling down and placing both arms into the ground. A second later, a ring of roots will pop out of the ground around him. If you were too close to him, this move dealt a decent chunk of damage and knocked you away. Now there's a more powerful form of this attack where several more rings come out in succession after the first ring. Each new ring is larger than the last one, creating a wave-like hitbox in all directions. The trick is to wait for the first ring to pop up and then a moment later to roll into the Ancient Leshen where that ring used to be, so that the second ring misses you. You see what I'm saying? So the earlier ring expires before the next ring becomes active. That's really important to understand. Alternatively, you could just run away from the whole move, but then you're kind of wasting your opportunity to punish him. Also, an important tip to shield users is to turn away from him so that the first ring pushes you into the Ancient Leshen rather than into the second ring. So if you face toward him, you're going to get knocked away, and then the next ring's going to knock you away, and then the next ring's going to knock you away. And you're just going to take a ton of chip damage and lose a lot of stamina. However, if you face away from him, the ring will actually knock you backwards into the Ancient Leshen. Move number 14, Homing Roots. This is one of the most dangerous root attacks in the fight. They deal very high damage and can land multiple hits of damage through the Rocksteady Mantle to easily kill you. The Ancient Leshen will start this move out by crossing his arms and raising them up over his head, so they're actually crossed. Then he slams both arms down into the ground. When his arms hit the ground, you'll see a small root pop right up under your feet, and then explode a moment later into a large root with a sizable hitbox. This is basically the equivalent of the Behemoth's Meteor. It actually tracks the player, and you have to really be running or time your dodge in order to avoid it. Similar to Meteor, these attacks can stack on top of each other, and that's what's killing you when you wear Rocksteady Mantle. And finally, we have move number 15, the Root Pin. This is the first grab in the game that can easily one-shot you. It also has a big tell. The Leshen will typically use this pin after summoning Jagras, but he can use it at any time. He'll start by raising his right arm high into the air, that's kind of the giveaway, and then he'll slam it down. A small root will pop up under your feet, and if you haven't outspaced the move by a lot at this point, you really only have a second to try and dodge it. I also want to point out you do have to have guard up in order to block this move. So if you're a shield user, you need to be getting out of the way or you need to be sheathing and diving. A more powerful version of the root pin will attempt to grab you 3 times. If you've been grabbed, your teammates have a few seconds to try and free you from it before the Leshen follows up with Revoltures and a heavy-hitting finishing blow. In fact, you can even be grabbed while standing next to the Ancient Leshen. This is like a worst case scenario, right? You can be grabbed while you're standing next to him, and then you're going to take chip damage from his bird aura the entire time. Root pin, in my opinion, is not that big of a deal in multiplayer, but if you try to solo him, I guarantee this will be the move that kills you more than anything else. It has a bullcrap hitbox and can pull you right out of the air if you were airborne. Do your best to sheath your weapon and keep running while he tries to land it. The Temporal Mantle will auto-dodge it, thank God, and the Rocksteady Mantle will give you some extra defense to help survive. If you have Rocksteady Mantle and full health, you should be able to tank the whole move. Okay, so now you have a much better chance of getting through this fight, because once you learn to recognize his moves, they're much easier to deal with and avoid. It's all about understanding his body movements, because the roots themselves pop up before you can react to them. You could even consider rewatching the moveset segment of this video, because really once a player has learned to dodge all of a monster's moves, you've basically won the fight. In the last part of this guide, I'm going to give you advice on putting your builds together. These builds are for multiplayer, and they've been specifically designed for players that don't have a lot of equipment, so don't hesitate to upgrade the build if you have the armor and the decorations to do so. This first build is going to be for damage dealing, and it really helps if you have a healer on your team if you're going to use this. I'm using the Nergigante Heavy Bowgun, although you can replace this with the Tareth Horn Heavy Bowgun if you happen to own that one. What's nice about Destruction's Fusillade is that you can use the Spread Ammo level 3 when you're close to the Ancient Leshen, but when he's further away, you can also use the normal ammo level 3 so that you never really have to chase him. Additionally, you get Sticky Ammo level 3, which you're going to be able to use that for KO in Stage 4, as well as Paralysis Ammo level 2 that you can also use in Stage 4. In fact, if you bring all the ingredients needed, you can craft more Paralysis Ammo level 2 and cause him to become paralyzed twice, or you can just fly back to camp and you can constantly refill your paralysis ammo. It's really up to you. I think that one proc is enough. Use the shield mod to guard incoming attacks, and be sure to use your Wyvern Heart anytime the Ancient Leshen gets knocked down for a while. So if he gets knocked down, you can load the Wyvern Heart and then just fire right into his horns the whole time. Lastly, don't forget to buff your teammates with the Demon Ammo. This next build continues to be head and shoulders above the rest for building defense. I'm using a Rarity 6 gun lance from Kul'Tiroth called the King Gold Exploder. Really anyone should be able to access this one because it's only Rarity 6. It's a long shelling gun lance, which means you will be trying to charge your shells by holding down the shelling button. Notice I'm able to augment it twice for health regen, then I build health boost, recovery up, divine blessing, and tool specialist. All of these skills together make it considerably easier to survive in the fight against the Ancient Leshen. Our third build will utilize the Geralt set. If you absolutely have no way to augment health regen onto your weapon, which again, I feel that you're kind of under-geared if that's the case, but if it is the case, bring the Geralt set because super recovery and recovery speed together should help a little bit with trying to survive all of that chip damage you're going to be taking. You'll also want to spam the Igni sign because it does a fair chunk of damage and will give your team a stun every roughly 6 shots. Notice for my weapon I went with a Lunastra Styx hammer. Any Lunastra Styx weapon is going to have the razor sharp skill, which pairs well here as a Master's Touch substitute. Hammers are nice for the Ancient Leshen fight because they get a lot of ledges to ledge hop from, so you can help deal mount damage. They also deal stun, so you can eventually cause a KO on the Leshen. You get about 1 or 2 per fight. It really depends on how many people are using KO damage. And for the last build, we really need to show off wide range, because wide range is super important for buffing your teammates. Nothing really beats the Lunastra Beta Vambraces combined with the Lunastra Alpha Legs. These two pieces of armor are really efficient together. In this case, we're pairing wide range on the Hunting Horn Deep Vero. All you really need to remember is to drink a Mega Demon Drug and put down the Attack Up Extra Large buff with the Hunting Horn. You can then eat a Might Seed, and maybe someone on the team will shoot everyone with demon ammo as well. These kinds of stackable damage buffs make a big difference in being able to burn down the Ancient Leshen's massive health bar. Here's a bonus tip for Deep Vero that I'm experimenting with. You can use the Health Boost skill to heal your team, and then avoid extending it so that it expires sooner and you can use it again to heal your team. Alright, well that concludes the build section of the guide. There's plenty of other viable builds that I could have shown off, but I'm going to be saving those for my counter build videos. Once again, if you learned something new in this video, or you want randoms to find a guide like this one before joining you on your Ancient Leshen hunts, don't forget to leave some feedback so that it ranks better on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.